So welcome to the Diary of a CTO podcast. My guest today is Anvar Karimson, Group CTO and Executive Committee member at Kepler Cheuvreux, one of Europe's leading independent financial services groups. Anvar, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome indeed. Very welcome. A fellow podcaster. It's lovely to have you on. So Anvar, you've built, I think it's fair to say, a very impressive career to date, driving technology innovation across global financial markets, assuming roles such as leading front office development for ICAP and heading up client-facing technology for BGC Partners, and now overseeing group technology for Kepler Cheuvreux. A few other things I'd like to give you a shout out about. A little birdie tells me that you were very recently named European Trading Technology Industry Professional of the Year this year.
Indeed, thank you very much.
Congrats. And you're also a published author with your new book launched, Work Smarter. Definitely worth the read. Loads to unpack and loads to talk about today. Thanks for being here. Really interested to hear a little bit more about your journey and how you think about the world. So let's start at the beginning, if we may. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Kind of talk us through your career, how you got into tech, and through to where you are today as a CTO of Kepler Cheuvreux.
Brilliant, and thanks again for having me. Brilliant to be here. So my technology journey was almost the only thing I could think of. I've always been a techno optimist. I've always loved technology, and I love technology because with the help of a laptop, you can pretty much build whatever you like, and I like that independence and freedom. So for me, it really started off. I'm a developer by original trade.
Mm-hmm. What's your first PC?
It was actually a Mac.
A Mac? Well, bloody hell, not messing them out. Very posh.
Yeah, Apple back in the day. And I got into, I guess, financial services quite late compared to many people.
Yeah.
But I was instantly fascinated by the systems, the requirements around them, and really about how to build software that scales. And software that doesn't require constant sort of attention and changes. And that's really been the continuous thread, if you will. I've always been quite close to technology itself. I still do some development, although my team have kind of stopped my push access to the repo now. But I enjoy it. I enjoy development. I enjoy the process. And I think that development and building systems is something I would do even if I didn't get paid for it.
Right.
I just think it's a phenomenal thing. And really, as you kind of scale up, it's been a really interesting journey in terms of how trading systems have evolved, going from quite closed source, quite almost secretive systems to the big open source renaissance we're seeing today. And I find that really interesting because for a lot of these systems, we do need developers to come in and understand what the workflows are and what the requirements are. And then to do that, they need to understand a bit more about what these systems do and how they work. And I think that for financial services, that's been a bit challenging because everything has been secret, everything has been closed. And with the open source side of things, and we've been, at Kepler at least, we've been quite open in our journey and the good and the bad, because we believe in that transparency. We believe in bringing people along the journey so that they understand where we're coming from, but also where we're going, both from a client perspective, but also from a technology perspective, because now more and more in capital markets, they go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really refreshing approach to hear, I guess, within the financial services world, to have that level of transparency. But how do you feel that's changed the mindset of the average developer or people in the world of technology now, that, there is that sort of move from the kind of secretive, not giving away the special source, to a bit more kind of open source?
I think what it does is that it helps us form best practices around things that are different from kind of the secretive part. There's still a secretive part, but there's a lot of stuff around that. And I think that's really beneficial for for all of us, really, because what we end up with is better, more resilient systems, more well-tested code, and also a richer set of tooling around that.
Yeah.
And that's good. I think that's generally for the industry, that's an excellent thing. And you will see that a lot of the conversations around build versus buy, for instance, fundamentally, both options tend to use very similar technology. And so if someone starts off with open source, they'll be able to take on a buy system, and they'll understand fundamentally what that means. And that's really important, because we talk about mechanical symphony, and what that means is for you to understand enough of the technical aspects of the system, how they physically work, to be able to make decisions that impact how they will work. And to do that, I would argue you do need open source. You do need to be able to open up the hood and see really, how does this work? Can I replicate that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really again, I think refreshing but encouraging to hear that you still enjoy cutting code, especially as a group CTO of a company the size of Kepler Cheuvreux, and that's always a really interesting transition, isn't it? But it is one of the reasons I love my job, and actually why, if I could go back again and pick any other area of recruitment, I'd still pick technology, because it's so nice that you very often do meet people where it is just their innate passion, and you speak to people that kind of, like you said, always knew that they were going to be in tech, and always sort of driven by that. But how do you feel that approach to staying close to the coalface technically, and still cutting your code, how do you feel that enables you as a more strategic leader in today's age?
I think that if we flip let's say I stay away, right? My day would be full of meetings. It would be full of presentations, timelines, etc. I think what happens is that you end up being very, very busy, which for a lot of people is a badge of honor. But I would argue that your impact on whatever you're trying to achieve, in let's say you're building a trading platform, the best thing you can do as a senior leader is to think about where you can provide the most impact, where you can actually help the most.
Yeah.
And that's rare. It's rare to be able to do that, I think, if you don't understand the technical details, if you don't understand what your tech teams are going through, you don't understand, the challenges they're up against and what that really feels. I think I would argue it's hard for you to know where you can make the most impact, because, it's one thing to look at a spreadsheet, but it's a completely different thing if you're a junior developer and you're struggling with someone, you're not getting the help you need. You need a technical leader who understands what that feels like.
Yeah, that's a really great point, actually. And I think the further up the tree you go, like you said, people sometimes probably are a little bit further removed from the coalface, and then it becomes a little bit of an element of probably self-doubt, or because they are a little bit further away from the tools, so they do kind of maybe bury themselves more towards this kind of ideology of being a busy fool. But rather than, like you said, I think there's a great point that you make, is like, where can you actually achieve most impact, right? And there's a real element of kind of self-awareness sometimes, isn't there, of you could spend all day every day in a meeting.
Oh, absolutely.
But actually, where is your time best spent? And I think that's a very shrewd observation and way of looking at things. What else do you feel along your journey, having assumed a number of leadership and head of development now into obviously the C-suite as a CTO? What else do you feel are some of the most valuable qualities as a technology leader that you try and demonstrate day to day?
Well, I think that, and this is not a recommendation. It works for me. It might not work for anyone else, but I'm very anti-busyness. So I actively refuse to take on too many meetings. I will answer emails once or twice a day unless they're urgent. And I generally do not like the whole sort of always on culture of getting constant teams, constant pings here and there. It wreaks havoc with my ability to actually think strategically about what we need to do.
Interesting.
And equally, I think one of the tempting things to do is to make big swooping changes. You see something doesn't work. Okay, let's reinvent this process. Whereas actually, I do think that sitting and living with something and really figuring out what is the smallest thing you can do to test the change works better in the long run. And the analogy I have is that when we moved into our house many years ago, we saw all of these things that we wanted to change straight away. And it's very tempting to do that. Whereas we made that choice that we were going to live as is and really understand why those choices had been made in the first place. And, fast forward a few years later, and our plan then had completely changed because we started to understand why some choices have been made, and we saw the point of that. And I think because technology is software in our world, a lot of it, and software is easy to change, it's so easy to just jump on that and say, oh, we need to rebuild this, we need to rebuild that. But actually, you need to understand what it is you're building, and you need to fundamentally understand the decision process that went into building what it is you're changing. And then the third point for me is around energy management, and I see this a lot. Some people, they can be always on, right? And that's great. For me, for instance, I'm a morning person. I like mornings. And so I try to stay away from meetings in the mornings because I have the energy to actually kind of engage in deep work and make sure that I put in the effort that is required. And then, I try to schedule meetings in around my schedule where maybe I'm a bit lower on energy, but obviously I'm not falling asleep, but it's sufficient for that kind of work, and I think it works really well for me. I speak to a lot of people who are similar. They might be morning people, but then they'll just block out. They'll have tons of meetings in the morning, and the deep work is being pushed to the afternoon, and then you're tired. And then when you're tired, you tend to take on easier tasks, I would argue.
Yeah. Again, I keep using the word refreshing. I think I'm going to be very refreshed by the end of this episode. But I love that approach. And there feels like a real element of, I don't know, kind of innate confidence in what you're describing, in like that kind of leadership style of, that self-awareness piece, knowing when to say no, but also knowing what gets the best out of you as an individual, right? And I think you say right that we're living in this world now where we've created this capitalism view of the world of always on. If you're not always on, you're not working. And certainly in tech, the difference between, being super busy and energy management and being able to get into that deep work state, like you said, I think it's because it is sort of very mentally challenging work, and obviously lots of jobs like that are, I think it's even more important in the world of tech sometimes to think about those concepts and be confident enough, I guess, to push back to the business sometimes to go, no, I'm not going to do that meeting, whatever it may be. And it's rare, right? I mean, you're probably the first person I've spoken to, I think, in the history of doing this podcast that's had that kind of approach, but it logically makes a lot of sense, and it definitely resonates with me in the way that I run my business, the way I like to run my diary as well. The world probably isn't going to stop spinning on its axis if you don't do that meeting at 8:30 in the evening when you're supposed to be putting your kids to bed or something like that, right? And you've got to pick your priorities, haven't you, of what's most important to you in life. So yeah, I love that. And to be honest, I think this is probably a great time for us to take a bit of a segue into talking about work smarter. So yeah, talk us through it. I mean, I'm always massively impressed when people actually, everybody says I could write a book but actually doing it, getting it written, having the discipline to get it written. And then obviously, it's a great piece. So talk us through then, what gave you the idea to write it in the first place, and just talk through the process of writing it and and what you discussed within it.
Yeah, it really just started off as something for fun. I've always liked to write, and so initially it was the idea of just having a few blog posts around what I'd seen. But then as I started, I really enjoyed the process, and I think I would say I probably enjoyed 70% of the book.
Okay.
30% around the editing and rewriting and sharpening, and that got pretty tedious. But the idea was really to distill some of the things that I've learned into a more cohesive format. And one of the things I've seen a lot of is that the people that care the most are usually the ones that burn out the fastest, because you care so much, you make yourself available. You're helping everyone, you're showing up to all the meetings, you're sitting on the weekend trying to catch up to things. And in the end, what happens is that all that effort doesn't necessarily translate to impact. It doesn't initially, but then over time, as you kind of get closer and closer to being overwhelmed, your impacts start to diminish. And really, what you do is you end up, I think, in some cases, alienating your team members. You end up isolating yourself, which kind of exacerbates the issue as well. So the book is really about working around that and working smarter and saying no, because every yes you do say is a no to something else. And again, I think I think every person in an organization needs to think about, where can I provide the most value, and focus exclusively on that, and saying no to all the other stuff around that. Because to your point, the world doesn't stop spinning, right?
Yeah.
And in the end, for us, we look at a lot of at the impact we're making, the change we're driving. And the book goes into energy management, but also I'm a big believer in small habits. You change, you tweak a little bit. Like, for instance, one of the examples we have is for a trading support desk. Being able to, before end of shift, write down, what some of the open issues you have, so that the person coming in the next morning, first thing they do is do a summary of where we are today and send that out to the desks that need it. That way, it's a tiny thing. It takes 2 minutes, but it makes the world of a difference in terms of how clients perceive you, how the desk perceive you. And it's such a small thing, because what happens if you don't do that, you start getting bombarded. Where are we with this? Has this been deployed? Have we implemented this? And actually, it ends up taking a lot more time. And so, again, if you sit down and you map out your day and you look at the high impact tasks and the low impact tasks, and you try to automate or systemize the low impact tasks so that they are done without your active participation, you can actually focus on changing the dial. And it doesn't take a lot of those small habits to start to compound and build up. And all of a sudden you have more time, and with more time you're doing bigger things, more impact, and you get recognized for it. And it is this kind of very positive flywheel almost.
Yeah. It's the compound interest phenomenon. Small things a little over time. And it's tough, right? Because like I said, sometimes they're not massive things you have to do, but it does take, I guess, an element of discipline. And I think that's where most people fall off the horse with anything like that is consistency. But like I said, I massively agree that the ability to marry together small logical changes with consistency is just, an unbelievable force over time. The other part that you mentioned in there about, working smart and recognizing your impact. I think it's again, obviously we've spoken about this already, but I think it's a really important part. I've become quite obsessed recently with the concept of teams and people within the teams playing to their strengths. So like, what is their superpower in what they do day to day? Because, we can't be a master of all things, and the reason I think about this in recruitment specifically is, I've worked in companies in the past where, they would only hire people that can do the end-to-end from like the resourcing piece through to being really comfortable with clients and like going knocking on doors and doing the BD side. And it's just unrealistic. It's not the way the world works. It's not the way society works, right? Everybody's got different personalities, different traits, different strengths and weaknesses. And the analogy that resonated with me most is you could literally have the best team, best World 11 football team that ever existed with, like Ronaldo up front and Gordon Banks in goal. Let's go English with the best keeper ever. But, if you've got the best team, the best 11 players on the pitch, but Ronaldo's in goal, Gordon Banks is, sticking him in the back of the net or trying to, you're not going to win many games, right? And I think that's the biggest thing of like everybody just being really open and aware of this is actually my strength, and also this is what I enjoy. This is what I like to get out of bed every day and do. And if you're passionate about it and you enjoy it, it will have a value.
Yeah,
I believe, and it's just about playing the game to ensure that everybody in the team feels valued, feels fulfilled, enjoys what they do day to day. And I think that's where so many companies get it wrong. It's like, well, we've got this job here. Do you want to do it? Yes or no? Do you tick all those boxes? And if you don't, you're not doing that job. And they miss out on talent that could be so valuable to the business if guided down a more impactful route of areas that they want to be doing, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a really great point you made.
No, and 100%. I think also what I would add to that is also as an individual, I think what people don't do enough of is to sit down and think about what do they enjoy? What areas are important for them? Because if you don't know, then it's hard for someone else to kind of pull that out of you.
Yeah, massively. Without getting too philosophical, but I do think a lot of it sort of boils down to childhood and the way that we're ingratiated into the world of authority. With like teachers and things like that. It's like, certainly when I was at school, I was very lucky to have a great schooling and I did enjoy it. But you think back to the kind of, and I see it now in my kids and the way that they're schooled. And I do think there's been real positive changes there in terms of the way that teachers and kids actually interact now and the questions that teachers ask. It very much used to be, I'm the teacher, listen to me, I'm the voice of authority. And, you can never really question. It's like, this is the way we've always done it. And I think that's fed very much into certainly my generation's way that they think about work, is that you go into work and you don't question and this is a job and you need to work hard at it and blah, 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 blah. Versus your point of, thinking, do I actually want to do this? Like, is this actually what I want to do for the next 40 years of my life? And if not, it's kind of okay to go, no.
Yeah.
But it's just something I think we're all kind of zombie walking into and I think the next generation, of course, there's always successive progression, isn't there? But the next generation, I think, are way better at it than we were.
Absolutely.
And hopefully that's a positive. I guess more in the entrepreneurial spirit of things. But no, I think it's I think even more valuable in the times that we live in, actually, with burnout, with mental health, and mental load and things like that around work. So books like this, I think, make a massive difference and a real positive change. So I'll pop a link in the description for the video, and definitely grab a copy. Worth the read, 100%. So you've obviously mentioned a little bit about when you're approaching burnout, you can maybe start to alienate your team, things like that. As a group CTO, I know for a business like Kepler Cheuvreux, you've obviously got offices all over the world. It's a huge international organization. Interested to understand a little bit about your thoughts on, bearing in mind your perspective on leadership and working smart. How do you go about as a leader building the right culture within teams, especially if they're teams that are co-located internationally and you're not necessarily with them all day, every day? How do you, what's your approach to that, I guess, to sort of fostering a successful culture?
I think the kind of the primary, the very top foundational level is about respecting your team. And I don't mean that, as a sort of company organization perspective. On a very human level, you have to respect everyone in your team because they come with different views, different perspectives, different experiences. And I think it's only by having that fundamental respect for everyone that you can understand where someone is coming from.
Yeah.
And to your point, once you do that, you kind of figure out where they fit in, and also sometimes where they might have some gaps, where they have some strengths, and I think that helps. But I think it's also around communication is always a bottleneck, right? Making sure that people know what's going on, because again, it's part of kind of that respect layer. But if you don't know what's going on, it's easy to be frustrated because you don't see the whole picture. So you might have a decision that you don't agree with. You're not seeing where it's coming from. And actually, there might be a good reason for that decision, but you don't know about it. So I think that's a challenge. I think it's also being as open and transparent as you can with people, to build up that trust. I think is super important, and that trust goes both ways, because if people feel they can trust you, you can trust them. That's where you can actually have a difficult conversation and say, well, look, we're not going to hit that deadline, or this isn't going as well as you thought. And it's only by having that transparency you can fix it, because my firm belief is that the goal is always to work together towards something. We always have this sort of view of, if one of us fails, we all kind of fail. And I think that's super important, because we're often asking people to put their time and effort into something for the greater good. So they need to understand what that greater good is, and where they fit into that. And also, I think it also comes back to, again, the people have stuff going on in their lives outside of work, right? So they might need some more flexibility. They might need to work slightly different hours. And again, I think coming back to respect, you have to just respect that, and you have to have systems in place that allows that to happen. And for me, it's driven from a very selfish perspective, because I like my deep work time, and if everything falls apart around me when I do that, then that was not going to work. So that has kind of driven this need of being able to accommodate people. And that's great, because it ultimately, it's a journey where you bump your head many times, but it builds resilience in the team. You end up with something that is more resilient, both from a technical perspective, but also from a culture and people perspective. And again, that means that you have more time to fix things when they go wrong, because you have that trust in the organization. So I think that's really foundational. And I think having individual conversations with people is really important. I spend a lot of my time just talking to people, without an agenda, just giving someone a call. You have to be careful. Obviously, you end up taking a lot of your time away and their time. But I think it's important to get a full picture. You talk about authority, and for me, hierarchy is obviously somewhat important, but also not something you want to hide behind, because that's where things can go wrong. Ultimately, from my perspective, I am responsible for everyone in my organization. So there's really no one to hide behind. And I think that's the way it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a great answer. I mean, there's so much that you said in there that kind of, informs the next. But I think the point that really resonated with me, and just from us chatting now and understanding a bit more about your leadership style, is, I can really understand how the way you work fosters that culture of transparency. And, excuse my French, that sort of no bullshit kind of, let's just do what we need to do. Let's impact the areas we need to impact. I think it's, so empowering for people to have that, where, maybe a leader isn't sort of falling into that, I need to make myself look important, and I need to be doing this and micromanaging you all day, every day. And like you said, just having that level of transparency, building that level of trust. I think that's truly how you create engagement. Right? And it resonates with me so strongly, because I've worked in literally some of the most micromanagement kind of draconian environments you can find, I think, anywhere, not just in the recruitment world. And I was so intentional about not having that when I created True North. And also, because quite frankly, that's not how I want to spend my days, right?
Yeah.
Like I say, from a selfish point of view, you want to do the bits of the job you want to enjoy, right? And, do the bits where you're going to create most impact. And I just think those cultures that, and we're starting to see it, weirdly, like creeping back in. I think COVID obviously was a horrendous few years for lots of reasons, but, definitely there were some positives that came off the back of it, in terms of a bit of a factory reset for a lot of people around actually their priorities in life and so on and so forth. And it also showed us actually that the world, doesn't fall apart if you're not in the same room 5 days a week. You can do deep, meaningful work, keep businesses, afloat, sitting at your kitchen table. Obviously, I think everybody's past that now, where they do want a bit more interaction, but, there's there's so many positives I think have come off the back of that, but we're starting to see it creeping slowly back towards a lot of companies now, entering back into this sort of, actually we're nearly back to where we were, and let's go back to the presenteeism model of, you know, asking people to come in more often. And, you know, I think the thing we see in the market, and I don't know if you feel the same, but interested to get your thoughts, is people don't mind coming into the office. Like, people don't mind spending time together if there's a reason.
Yeah.
Right? If there's value that is gleaned from it, you know, people are intelligent, they're smart. They know, like, if I come in, I wouldn't have got this same level of information, same level of engagement, same feeling maybe that I would have got sat at my kitchen table. So I'm happy to come in. But the thing where I think so many people are getting it wrong now is like asking Dave to come in on a Friday because he's not been in the number of days that he should have been in this week, and he comes in on a Friday and he's sat on his own in an empty office doing team calls that he could have been doing at home, right? And I literally had that exact example quite recently with a candidate. I was like, it's really quiet, where are you? He's like, I'm actually in the office. And he got his laptop and it showed me around the office, and he was the only person in an office of like 500 people, but he had to be in that day, and he had to travel down from like the Midlands or something. And it's just like, it's bonkers, isn't it? That's kind of a lot of companies going back to that. But I think the way you're talking about the culture you're fostering, you know, to me, it's just, it makes sense. It's logical, you know, which is great to hear. Interested to, I think we've done a really good job of, we're about half an hour in and no one's mentioned AI. Wow, that's a first. You know, I think that's probably a record. But interested to get your take on, you know, the space you're operating in. Obviously, a very highly regulated industry. How you see the future of technology in terms of embracing AI, you know, tools that you feel could increase efficiencies and obviously increase customer service, so on and so forth. But obviously, doing it in a fashion that protects the integrity of the service, data, so on and so forth. What are your views on, you know, embracing the latest technology of what's coming down the line, but doing it in a responsible way that, you know, obviously keeps the bees in the box?
We were early adopters of the technology, and from the very beginning, the framework we put in place was focused on impact. We set out to do many different experiments in different areas, and at the time they were labeled as experiments, so we didn't really focus so much on creating all the guardrails and making sure that every, you know, thing was ticked, because we fundamentally weren't sure what the limit of the technology was. And that really helped us accelerate our journey. I speak to a lot of peers who were in organizations that did it the other way around. And where they are on their journey is very different to where we are. We're very comfortable with the technology.
Okay.
And now, you know, whenever we get close to production, we start adding guardrails. We start making sure that this is a responsible way of doing things. But, you know, even looking internally within the tech org, we started using AI for coding tasks very early on, and we had to go through this sort of wave internally of it brought on a lot of anxiety. What does this mean for me as a developer? To, oh, this is rubbish, it doesn't work, to the other side, which is, okay, I can see how I can leverage this technology. And, you know, it wasn't always easy. We had some heated arguments where developers, you know, I almost had to force them to use this. But now that we are on the other side, it's a huge accelerator for us. You know, I looked at the stats a few weeks ago, and I think in a month we accepted something like a few 100,000 lines of code. Not all of it made it into kind of our source tree, but it was enough that people thought, okay, I need to dig into this.
Yeah.
And it's a huge accelerator for us, because what we end up doing is we have these kind of building blocks that we use to build on, and we now have enough information given to AI that they understand those building blocks. So assembling something that fits in is quite a straightforward process, and we have AI help us with testing, with deployment, with development, with even learning other languages. And I think, even the team, even though we've been using it for a few years, they're still discovering new ways. And I had a lead UI engineer, ping me the other day to say, he discovered a new workflow, and it cut down on, he was able to deliver much, much faster this way. So it's super interesting for us. And where we look to add to it is around, security scanning, but also the idea of how do you onboard a new developer? They're faced with a project that might have a few million lines of code. How do you navigate that? And here AI can actually help you build that map, and it's super powerful for us. So I think it's a really interesting space. It's a really interesting space. And I think as a developer, you should really understand what's possible with the technology and what is not possible. And I think also from a larger organizational point of view, it's allowed us to fix all the small things, where you don't want to assign a developer, you don't have the resources. So you just end up kind of hacking away with your spreadsheet and stuff. Whereas now we can just kind of automate that a little bit. And it's super nice. We had this project where we needed to, we used a system to get some information out of PDFs. It wasn't high profile. It was sort of deep in the business. But we needed that data. And historically, the analysis we wanted to do were just not possible. Because we didn't want to commit resources to do it better, and without the resources, there was no analysis. And we were able to just turn to AI to do that. It turned around very quickly, and we were able to actually discover some really interesting insights just because of that little thing. That would never have happened otherwise.
No.
And the same thing with modernizing some of your legacy, for instance. Again, what we see there is these are thankless tasks. Technology changes, upgrade the library, you have to retest everything. But if you can use AI to help with that, then all of a sudden you can keep your whole code base, modern. And that changes a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a really kind of balanced and pragmatic approach I think you're taking there. A couple of things that I think deserve to be mentioned that probably helped you along on that journey. I think, like you say, the first thing is being an early adopter, right? And actually just having the I suppose confidence and volition really as a CTO sometimes to turn around and go, look, I know this is the way we need to go, right? And this is what needs to happen. And I think, again, it boils down to the transparency element of being able to have those conversations. And what you mentioned there, I've definitely seen that play out in quite a few other companies where there's probably a reticence from maybe, kind of the more senior end of the spectrum in the world of development, where people probably often act out a level of pride and maybe not, I say arrogance or maybe pride, but there's an innate skepticism there. There's no way this can do the same job as me, and like you said, there's probably an element of fear of this is going to take my job. And I've seen a lot of the better CTOs I know out there go on that emotional journey with the engineers, but stick to their guns and go, look, we are using it, and I know you're a developer and you don't want to use it, but you're going to use it. But doing it in a way where you still create that safe space where people feel like they're not being replaced, like you said, and ultimately, you kind of turn the needle on people's understanding, and it's a bit of a chicken and egg, isn't it? I guess people are going to be more prone to use it once they see the results and they see, what they're going to get out of it. But I think that is a real skill of a CTO today, is to not just go, from one end of the spectrum, right, we're using that technology, crack on with it, but doing it in a safe way where you're kind of really shaping people's emotional engagement to it and how they're using it, but you're doing it in a way where they feel safe, they feel like they can do it in an innovative way. And, like I said, you're obviously further down the road now, but you're still discovering, things that in new workflows and that kind of thing. And there's so many companies out there that haven't even started yet, right? And
Yeah.
they're going to be left behind very quickly unless they think about, how it can be used as a force multiplier. Like I said, it's obviously massively boosting your production now because it feels like you've shaped quite a mature mentality to how you're using it. But also, like you said, there's a lot of things there that we use AI as this overriding banner, right? Of and I guess really, to all intents and purposes, now we're talking about LLMs, but often it's not AI that's needed. It's just some form of automation or whatever it is. Actually, just creates massive, time-saving benefits or operational benefits for the company. But there's maybe reticence for people to use it because it's AI. But yeah, it sounds like you've got a really, really kind of balanced view around that. And
I think what we also discovered is if we look at what I call personal AI, which is really instead of central systems, it's your ChatGPT, it's your, Claude or whatever you may have it. I think so much of it is that personal part, because I know a lot of companies have these AI center of excellences and they kind of, drop people in to accelerate AI initiatives, etc. I think sometimes it's obviously very dependent on the organization, but sometimes I feel like the people who are receiving these drop-in AI engineers, that's how you create that fear, because there's a technology you don't fully understand. There's someone external coming in and saying, I'm gonna teach you. So you naturally draw that link of, okay, but hold on, what does this mean for me? And this was true for the developers, but we've seen it in the business as well. If we come as a tech team and say, we're gonna show you how to automate your business process using AI, all the walls go up, right? Whereas the main innovation, like the biggest part of innovation we've seen, is where we almost take a step back. Here's the tech, have a play, see where you get. If you have any issues, obviously come to us, but also ask around, see what other people are doing. And that's just driven a lot of the innovation in this space, especially on the business side. It's been great, but you have to, I think as a technology leader, you have to accept uncertainty, and that's really hard for a lot of people to do. And uncertainty is it goes everywhere in what you do. It could be about planning, it can be about the implications of a decision, but fundamentally, I think as a leader, you have to be comfortable with the level of uncertainty, and giving AI to the business and not be kind of micromanaging that brings uncertainty, but it also pays off, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you speak a lot of sense, Anvar. You should write a book. No, you do though, and one of the points I'm quite keen to ask you around, I guess, when we're thinking about the people you have in the business and obviously the relationship that you have with them, you're obviously responsible for a number of different offices, locations, people, skill sets, I'm sure. When it comes to growing the team and your view on talent to join the organisation, bearing in mind we're very much in the state of flux at the moment with how technology is being used and the speed of evolution of different tools, libraries and languages, so on and so forth. What overarching traits and characteristics do you look for in people when joining the business that you would say are kind of like the golden thread that run throughout, anybody that comes into the organisation, irrespective of, the role, skill set? What's your approach on the kind of people that you look to join you?
The main point, and this is very specific to us and how we like to work, how I like to work, is resilience.
Getting that as a theme.
Yeah.
Is resilience.
Resilience.
Yeah.
And because we know that there's going to be issues, maybe there's not enough information, maybe the timelines are too tight, maybe, all sorts of stuff. So you need to have someone who is fundamentally resilient to these things. And resilience is rooted in confidence, but not arrogance, because I think it's hard to be arrogant and resilient at the same time. But also that self-drive, that curiosity, because every single person we hire has that curiosity to understand things more, to understand, we call it kind of role plus, where you have your your main role, what you contribute, but also understanding the surrounding areas. It works for us because we have very few boundaries. An engineer can be involved in pretty much end to end of everything. So we put it a lot of it we put into individuals' hands to see what interests them, what makes them come into work and get involved in that. So I think culture is really key for us, and a lot of companies say that, but if I boil it down, it is curiosity and resilience. If you have those two, the rest we can figure out, right? And it has worked, because also kind of the third element, but I think that's sort of implicit, is empathy. Because again, that's really important. You don't want people who lack empathy, because we all have issues. We all have, whether it's you have to work slightly strange hours because of a family thing, or maybe you just don't understand this new technology, or you're just not quite there for whatever reason, right? You need to have have empathy for people to understand where they're coming from, not apply more pressure, but work around that and allow people to kind of still contribute in the best possible way. I think those three go kind of hand in hand almost.
Yeah, I think they do. It's like a really nice sort of triangle, isn't it? Of, the curiosity piece, I guess, is talking a little bit about what we spoke about earlier of, once you understand that, you can kind of move people towards things that they are curious about and they do enjoy doing. So I think that's a great point. Resilience, call it resilience or tenacity or whatever you will, but I think that ability to be proactive, get knocked back and then get back on the horse again, certainly it's something that massively resonates with me in the world of recruitment. It's absolutely vital. And the empathy piece, I think those first two are very kind of outward looking, aren't they, in terms of sort of evolution of the business and growth of the business. But the empathy piece, like, massive around, it just means, just be decent to a decent person to work with, right? Don't be a dick. And I think it's nice to be able to actually understand other people's problems and not be overbearing and have that empathy. So I think those three things would work really, really well together. So I think that's, again, a great approach. Cool. Look, really, really enjoyed the conversations, Amber. I think it's been a long, I'm not just saying this to blow smack at your dairy. It's been a long time since I've had an episode where I've agreed so wholeheartedly and resonated with a lot of your perspectives and how you view the world. So I can see, why you've been such a successful leader and obviously that Kepler Cheuvreux is in very safe hands. But I like to draw to a close every episode, you may know by now, with the same question, if you would care to indulge me, which is, what would you say has been your one favorite piece of advice that you've ever received throughout your career that you would care to pass on to your fellow human?
I think it's rooted in curiosity. Very early on, I spent a lot of time looking outside of what I was immediately working on, and whether that is understanding the business you're in a bit better, understanding technology a bit better, understanding what works for you a bit better. It is that constant curiosity, and it doesn't feel like much at the time, but if you set out to explore something new, every week, over time, that's going to build up to a huge inventory, because I think not enough people do that. I think you do your job, and you have your kind of daily struggles, but you don't make a conscious effort to plan out what is important to you and where you want to end up. Usually people might have a goal to say, look, I want to be the CTO in 15 years or 10 years or 5 years. But how do you map out that path? What skills do you need? And what do you need to know about yourself to get there? I think we're very good at to plan out a technical project, but how many people sit down and plan out their career? And reevaluate it, because things change. What was important 5 years ago might not be important to you anymore.
Well, especially now, right? And it's hugely different, isn't it? The speed at which things are moving. But no, I think that's a great point, and it's certainly something that whenever we speak to, any candidate really, level of seniority aside, it's like, well, where do you actually want to get to? Right? So otherwise you're kind of setting sail on the ocean without a compass, hoping you're going to land in your destination. It's like, well, what is that end destination? And then once you know that, like say, you put the building blocks in place to enable that to happen. So I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the other piece around curiosity, I do think such a great way to look at things, because I find that when you see those people that are constantly curious and wanting to just always understand stuff, it keeps your brain sharp, and it keeps you actually kind of more, I think, competent and able to do things, but it just makes you a better problem solver, doesn't it? Because you kind of like, well, actually, I've learned about this thing over here, and I might not be a master in it, but I could probably take something from there and draw that in here, and it just makes you more adept, I think, at the job that you do day to day. And I think it's something that certainly as leaders, you kind of sometimes get to that place where you think, well, I'm a leader now. I know what I'm doing, and I don't need to learn anything else. And it's the quickest route, I think, to stagnation, but also probably ultimately unfulfillment in your job as well, because where's the fun in just doing literally the same thing every day without kind of external new stimulus? So I think they're both like really great points, and a fantastic way to draw to a close of the episode. So not a lot more remains but to say thank you again for coming in and having a chat with us. Really enjoyed the conversation. Please do keep in touch. Best of luck with the book, Work Smarter, available in all good book stockists.
Not yet. Amazon for now.
Amazon. Well, that's a pretty good one, right? I mean, that's not a bad place to start. So you can get your copy on Amazon, and definitely worth the read based on this conversation. So yeah, look, thanks again. And yeah, let's keep in touch. Come back again, see you soon.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me.